Welcome to all the candidates. Round one, our first topic is making Winnipeg the easiest city in Canada to start and grow a business. My first question is going to be posed to all 5 of the candidates here today. Each one will have a chance to give their thoughts on it and respond. Question 1. The Winnipeg Chamber's Civic Election Performance Playbook calls for our next mayor and council to make Winnipeg the easiest city in Canada to do business. Based on extensive consultation with business professionals, we know there is a lot of work to be done to modernize systems, provide online access to services, and make it easier to obtain permits and approvals. So here's my question to you 5. As mayor, how would you consult with businesses, drive innovation, and measure progress towards this goal?
Everyone, as you know, I have a business background. I've started many social enterprises here in the city, doing what I believe to be Canada's defining issue, and particularly Winnipeg's defining issue, connecting the people who most need the work with the work that most needs to be done. I'm looking forward to working with you on the playbook, and in particular, just wanted to take a moment to talk about the permitting process. We need to innovate, we need to make it quicker, and I want to go beyond that. I want to use the permitting process just as an example of how we can have government that revolves around solving problems rather than managing, and using the permitting process to create markets for solutions. How does that look like? Well, if you're building a net zero house, if you're hiring people with barriers to employment, if you're reducing the amount of water that's going in, overwhelming the storm sewage system, you get a break in your permit fees. That's what innovation looks like to me.
Thank you, Mr. Loney. Next up, Glenn Murray, 1 minute to respond.
So we have to be the leading city in advanced technology. I've, for the last few years, been working with business partners. We are in the software as a service application. We could be turning our entire permit system upside down by using a SaaS system. I'm on a working group with a number of CEOs of software companies. We sell to most cities in the US in the circular economy space. We don't sell to Winnipeg, and most of us don't. When I asked people put up their rooms in municipal base, not one hand went up. I've been working with Paul Suber. He said, you're the first candidate, you're the first person on how we would do a rapid transit lab, how we could do innovation procurement, how much money we would save by doing life cycle procurement where we bought the parts. The basic building blocks of smart cities, of next century cities, are absent. We are still an analog government, and it's costing us money, and we raise $10 million in permit fees that go into general revenues that we're charging businesses for. That's wrong. If we're charging a fee, it should be to prove service. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Next up, Kevin Klein.
Well, thank you very much. Listen, I have traveled this country, and I've gone to other cities, and I've had to do risk assessments on companies that we wanted to purchase, and I've purchased companies. And I can tell you that the City of Winnipeg, we need to make it easy. We need to have one point of contact and walk organizations through the city process. We internally need to be continuously improving our processes. That's why I've talked about having a 90-day approval process for companies that want to start. But we also have to have that one point of contact. Easy access online, because when an organization or a young entrepreneur wants to launch a business or they're looking for a new location, we don't want to make it hard for them. We want to be there, we want to be an active partner with them. Basically, we want to hold their hand along the process and make sure that we're dotting the I's on their behalf, we're crossing the T's on their behalf, so they see the value and they have confidence in the City of Winnipeg. They have confidence that they'll be supported during their time here in our city, and that is what is key to bring business to our city.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Finally, Robert Falcon-Ouellette will respond.
All my relations. I think if we want to create a thriving business climate in our city, we need to address the root causes which is impacting far too many citizens across our city: addictions and poverty. Addictions affects every aspect of our city. It makes us nervous to take the bus. It makes people afraid to be downtown, and even makes many people afraid to be in their own backyards at times. And so we need leadership. Leadership which is going to be focused on this day after day, grinding away to actually make a difference. By making sure that we actually create innovation in policing, but also that we fund community-based safety initiatives. And this is going to be good for business. Because if people are afraid to be downtown, how can you open a business? Who would want to invest in our city? And I think we have the opportunity of charting a new course, having new leadership who will be focused on this day after day.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to have a bit of a candidate exchange to wrap up round one. In this round, candidates will pose questions directly to each other on the topic of making Winnipeg the easiest place in Canada to start and grow a business. The first question will be posed by Scott Gillingham. Sean Loney will have 2 minutes to respond, followed by a rebuttal from Scott. Then Glenn Murray will have the last word in this section before we move on to round two. So I'll pass it over to you, Scott.
I will bring a yes-first culture to City Hall. The people in this room know how allowing for efficient transportation of goods around the city is critical to any business. Just this morning, an exciting announcement, the province of Manitoba announced $40 million towards investing in Centerport to open up Centerport, to put pipes in the ground there. But key to opening Centerport and Centerport's success is expanding trade routes, which I've committed to, expanding Keniston Boulevard and Chief Peguis Extension. The development of Nawi-Odina, the potentially largest Indigenous-led economic development zone, depends on the widening of Keniston Boulevard. I've committed to those. Mr. Loney has said he will oppose the extension of Chief Peguis Trail, and he will oppose the widening of Keniston Boulevard, and thereby thwarting economic development. The question is, Mr. Loney, how can you tell this audience that you will say no to expanding trade routes which will hurt their businesses?
Thank you for the question. First thing I wanted to say is you have the three leading candidates right here. 7.5% residential property tax increase would be the largest residential tax increase in the last 20 years in Winnipeg. 0% property tax increase, according to something he said a couple nights ago, and I'll talk about mine in a minute. But let's be reasonable. Centerport is a fantastic opportunity for Winnipeg. The city's own administration has the project listed very high in its priority list. Chief Peguis Trail Extension is listed as 29th. Through this election, Councillor Gillingham wants to bump that from 29 up to the very highest echelons. He hasn't even done a cost-benefit analysis. He's telling us, after I go to the electorate, then I'm going to do a cost-business analysis. I'm from the business community. I understand that you do the cost-benefit analysis and then you ask permission from the people who are calling the shots whether or not the money flows. That's how it works in my world. And moving a project from 29th up to a very high is just completely irresponsible. Now, let me also say the magnitude of these decisions. Just the Chief Peguis Trail Extension is equivalent to a 7% residential property tax hike that we will pay for 30 years. And Councillor Gillingham, have you told the people who use the Louise Bridge and 24 other projects that you're going to bump down the line for your pet project, that they're going to have to wait? Have you talked to the RM of Rosser and talked to the RM of East St. Paul and West St. Paul, who are going to financially benefit, and ask them for cost sharing?
Scott Gillingham, you now have a minute to respond.
It's time to invest in our economy, and that's what I'm dedicated to do. Mr. Loney wants to stifle our economy. His plans are to, I think it was something about making Keniston a greenway, and I don't even know, frankly, what that means.
You wouldn't know. Something the Government of Canada would actually fund.
Thank you very much. Final response, Sean Loney.
I note Councillor Gillingham wants to have more people downtown, but I'm the only one on the stage here who is in favor of opening up Portage and Main. I think that needs to be stated. There's many things on my platform about how we bring more life to downtown. The one that's got the most attention is my announcement we're going to appoint a nightlife mayor. And somebody asked me in the media, what happens if the nightlife mayor is more popular than the night mayor? Or the real mayor? And I said, well, we'll fire the nightlife mayor, of course. But really, none of these things are going to stick. There's 8 great suggestions in the playbook, but we have to address homelessness. And I want you to look up and down the stage and ask yourselves, who has the qualifications to address this issue once and for all, and understands that this is not a money issue, this is a systems issue.
Thank you very much. Round 3 of our candidate exchange will begin with Glenn Murray posing the question to Kevin Klein on the topic of reigniting our downtown. Robert Falcon-Ouellette will have the last word in this section. Over to you, Glenn.
So, Mr. Klein, we have had for many years sort of spurts and starts of success in the downtown. We have, excuse me, we have very, very serious problems. The area around the Disraeli Freeway has been very hard to develop. We have high levels of addictions and mental health, and we have a very severe lack of maintenance and neglect stripped away. Centre Venture lost its $600,000 a year funding and most of its authority, and we are now finishing up the Shed District, which is the last of Centre Venture's 3 major precinct programs, which have been successful. And really, if you look at Waterfront Drive, you look at the Red River campus, and you look at the area around the Shed, that is where the vast majority of buildings have been built. I would like to know what you think the role of the public sector is right now and what your priorities would be in government for public sector investments and what the role of the private sector ought to be in the downtown.
Kevin Klein, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Well, thank you very much. And I would say that the downtown has been a series of stops and starts, which is much like Mr. Murray's political career. Downtown's biggest problem that we have is still crime. I have talked to business owners that have opportunities downtown but are afraid to spend their money to invest right now. They're not looking for tax incentive programs. They're not looking for special favors. They're looking to make sure that the risk is not there anymore. They're wanting to make sure that people will come and work for them downtown, that they won't be afraid to walk around downtown. They want to ensure that there's not a homeless situation downtown, which is why I am the only candidate who said immediately we will pull the lever to call it a crisis and bring in accommodation trailers and the social services to help those that are unfortunately living in the most difficult part or time of their life. As some of you may or may not know, I've spent a couple of nights in a shelter, a Salvation Army shelter. I understand that fear and that feeling of no hope. We have to address that. We have to help those people and then start working with our businesses to create a destination downtown. And a destination has to be safe. It has to be vibrant. I'm sitting with 2 young men from a high school that are dressed better than anyone I've ever seen, Anton and Mohammed there, and I can see that they want to be in a downtown that's happening, that's vibrant, but they want to know it's safe. They want to be able to go downtown with their friends, and they don't want their parents to have to worry. Once we do that, then we start working with businesses to create destinations, to create opportunities in our downtown. We have some of the best, most intelligent minds in the country. We have to let them get to work once we fix the problem that they can't fix, and that's crime and homelessness.
Thank you very much. Glenn Murray, you have 1 minute to rebut.
So let's look at the life of Bryce Alston, the most active developer in the downtown and Exchange District, who is frustrated because for 20 years we haven't updated our zoning bylaws and our downtown plan. So when he goes to build a building on Bannatyne, the bylaws are 15 years out of date because council never did its job of updating them. So they're still built for low, medium rise. So he goes to put up a mid-rise building in there. Centre Venture didn't have the resources to help anymore. They have no budget. Normally they would negotiate and they would build a plan with the developer and take it to the city. That wasn't able to be done. Normally they would sort out the problems with the city in front. But the biggest problem they ran into was Mr. Klein, who voted for Bryce's option on the first time, all excited. Bryce worked very hard, got the other councillors on side, and then Mr. Klein voted it down,
Do you know why?
refusing it.
You know why?
So, I'm not interrupting you. So that is just plain wrong, and that tells you something about where the problem is, and the problem is some of the current councillors.
Thank you very much. Robert Falconer, you have 2 minutes for final remarks.
We need to build on our strengths, working together. And I think about if we want to create a vibrant downtown, what would that look like? It would be more people. And where can we get more people? Well, we're not going to convince people in the suburbs to move downtown. It's a little bit unrealistic for this city because people have their lives there. But what we can do is look to newcomers, keep them in our downtown core, looking to all those students. So I would look to work with the University of Winnipeg as a former university professor. I know how much we can work together if we get more students internationally to come. And I would like to see 5,000 more students at the University of Winnipeg. C'est important, l'immigration, d'être accueillant avec les autres. It's important for immigration to be welcoming to others. Il faut être capable de parler des autres langues. We need to be able to speak different languages. 我说中文，为什么我说中文？因为是很重要。因为我们可以宣传我们的公司 to be able to promote our country. That's Mandarin, by the way. I speak Mandarin. It's important to be able to speak with those around the world to tell them how important and how beautiful our city is. To be able to tell them to come, that there are so many opportunities here, and that there is a vibrant downtown where they can raise a family, where it can be a beautiful life. But currently we can't offer that to people because our downtown, we are not proud of it yet. And so that is the goal here, is how we can do 100 projects, not one gigantic project like Portage Place Mall, which was supposed to save downtown, or this project was supposed to save downtown, but 100 little projects done extremely well, done by our planning department, done by good urbanists, people who know exactly what it is they should be doing day after day. And I'm not talking 25 floor skyscraper, but little projects everywhere, so we have that beautiful downtown for each and every one of us. Hey.
Thank you very much. Round 4, the topic is building faster, smarter, and denser. This is the question to all 5 of the candidates. Community planning and development are some of the most important functions that a city provides. Cities across Canada are challenged by affordability and a shortage of housing. In the global battle for talent, housing access, and affordability, they are becoming an issue. Infill strategies, new environmentally sustainable development, and a regional collaboration with our surrounding municipalities are all part of the solution. How will you, as mayor, tackle the issue of planning for affordable, sustainable growth of our community? Kevin Klein, you are first up. You have 1 minute.
Thank you very much. I think that when I first got elected in 2018, I said one of the problems with our planning and property process was having elected officials sit at the table making decisions. And sometimes, quite often, we get saddled with questions or concerns from residents that we're representing. And it puts us into the middle of a situation where they're not experienced, they're not qualified. People sitting on city council are not planners, they're not architects, they're not developers. And at that time, I made a call and moved a motion that was not received well by council to have a planning commission. And I've tried that a few more times to ensure that we have experts working on this most critical issue in our city. And that's what I will continue to push for, is to ensure that we have the right people in the right spot making the decisions that are most important to us. These decisions are far too important to leave to politics. They have to be based on intelligence, they have to be based on skill, and we have to have people with the knowledge that can make the right decision, not based on politicians.
Thank you very much. Robert Falconer, 1 minute to you.
Well, people often think I'm only here to talk about homelessness and the issues in the downtown. In fact, actually, I also believe it's extremely important to be thinking about the infrastructure of our city, making sure that we have good quality infrastructure. I was proud to be on the Finance Committee when we were able to vote and get more monies to cities so the city of Winnipeg could actually start building more roads, because we've seen an increase in the number and the amounts of financing going towards our roads across Canada for municipalities. But I've also proposed actually being forward-thinking. We have a lot of infrastructure in our city which sometimes is not best used. So think about all those rail lines right across the city. And we build a lot of underpasses, overpasses. We have to rebuild the Arlington Bridge, over $500 million potentially. What if we actually did a study for once to actually get the numbers on the table so we can make good policy decisions about where we should be going and where we should be spending our money? Do we all need all those right-of-way lines all across the city, or could we be using for bus rapid transit or other types of transit systems?
Thank you very much. Scott Gillingham, you're up next.
As I said a moment ago, the first thing for me is to lead into a yes-first culture so that we are building more successfully, and those that want to invest in our city can do so more quickly. I've said I'll reorganize our 311 department and our planning department as well so that they're customer service based, so that your permitting processes go faster and quicker. I've also said, though, we need to build denser, and that's why I voted in favor of the Complete Communities 2.0 as a councillor, and I'll build on what I've done. Complete Communities 2.0 says that we want to build our city with 50% new development, greenfield development, but 50% infill development. For infill development to happen, to make it denser in our city, we need to make sure that the processes are going quickly. Finally, I've just announced recently as well that along Pembina Highway and Portage Avenue, if you own commercial property, you can build up with no parking minimums to take advantage of those key transit corridors. That will help densify our city.
Thank you very much. Sean Loney, your turn.
I announced a brand new idea for Winnipeg, a $100 million community housing land trust. And Councillor Klein and CGOB said, we can't afford a $100 million community housing land trust, but there's no tax dollars involved with it. It's just reimagining investment and inviting foundations and Winnipeggers to move some of our investments into the Housing Land Trust so that it has a soul and we can feel good about where our money is invested right here at home in Winnipeg. And what it does is own the land upon which nonprofits, co-op housing, co-housing can be built. And I think it's using these new types of ideas that we can address some of the housing problems that we have in the city. And like Robert, I'm interested in the rail relocation and would like to see it as Winnipeg's ultimate infill.
Thank you very much. Final response comes from Glenn Murray. You have 1 minute.
So we have done very successful residential infill. The Spence neighborhood under Harry Lahotsky was 300 infill housings. That program rolled out across the city very successfully. The real estate board, Peter Squires and community foundations did exactly what Mr. Loney was talking about. We had very, very big private-public partnerships, Lions Club, Habitat for Humanity, Winnipeg Foundation. We built a record number of affordable housing built on a neighborhood plan. In the downtown, we did something that I think we should be doing across the city and take Winnipeg Housing Rehab Corporation and make it into a super housing agency on Center Venture. Very similar to a trust idea, we would assemble all public lands. We would put the infrastructure in place, fully develop it if it needed a park. We would cost out what it made to make it livable, exactly as we did on Waterfront Drive. And then, as on Waterfront Drive, we would calculate the value uplift in the surrounding properties and what the net new property taxes would be to the city. In that case, they came out substantively ahead. We built Waterfront Drive, and we were tens of millions of dollars ahead, and we should be doing that in every possible housing developable site across the city with a citywide corporation and
Thank you very much. Moving on now to the candidate exchange. The first question on building faster, smarter, and denser will be posed by Kevin Klein to Robert Falcon-Ouellette. Scott Gillingham will then provide the closing arguments in this round. Kevin, you can ask your question.
So the city of Winnipeg, for quite some time now, has had opportunities to change the property planning and development process and to bring in experts from outside to making decisions and investments. And one of those investments that we have looked at is tax incentive financing investments. What will you do if you're successful, and what tax incentive investments would you provide for Portage Place, for Polo Park, for the Bay, and a number of other buildings? And are you looking at that for your affordable housing, or are you looking at different avenues?
You have 2 minutes to respond.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Klein. I think it's extremely important that we look for obviously different ways of financing affordable housing. I know that surface parking lots, the 20% of our downtown core is actually a surface parking lot right now, a vacant lot, and 20% of that is actually owned by governments. So we need to be working with community groups to make sure that they can have access to those lands to actually build the affordable housing we need in our communities. But we also need to consider using TIFs and other things to actually make sure there's a supermarket in our downtown core. Because if you don't have a supermarket, where do people buy their groceries? It's a basic necessity. I'd actually like to thank Mr. Klein as well for his work with veterans. He was able to do 20 tiny homes for veterans with Homes for Heroes. There is 160 veterans who are homeless in our city. And this goes unforgotten or is forgotten by many of us. They live in our bus shelters, they live in parks, behind back alleys. And I'd like to see every one of them housed, working with the Royal Canadian Legion. I'd also like to see the City Council actually offer their full leadership to End Homelessness Winnipeg, who had a plan in 2014 to end homelessness in 10 years, which should be in 2 years from now. And unfortunately, look where we are. It is time that we follow their plan, offer our full leadership as a community, working with the federal, provincial, municipal, school trustees, the business community, community groups, to actually do this for once, because it's actually going to make such a beautiful city for us all, one that we can be proud of leaving to our children, to say to them, look, you don't have to deal with this now. Now you can deal with other issues like the potholes and argue over infrastructure projects and other things which, are the perennial issues always of our city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kevin Klein, you have 1 minute to rebut.
Well, I want to first of all acknowledge and thank my colleague for mentioning Homes for Heroes. That was a long battle that I had to fight at City Hall to bring forward an organization that helps homeless veterans across Canada. And as many of you know, that we are one of the only cities in the country that actually charge them for property. And that's the only way that I could get through council to bring them to this city to take care of our veterans. There was no support from the federal government at that time, and we now have support from the provincial government and now from the feds because we work together on that. And that is what I am talking about as your mayor. We need to start working on partnerships. We need to start working together. Everyone told me you would not be able to get the federal government or the provincial government on side with Homes for Heroes, and they were wrong. They were open to those conversations, and now in the spring we will have Homes for Heroes, and we are on our way to eradicating veteran homelessness in the city of Winnipeg. We need to do the same thing with developments. We need to partner with people. We need to work together. We need to be at the table with them. We need to have creative solutions and work with them on the creative solutions.
Thank you very much.
We need to simplify the processes to be a better city. Sorry.
It's okay. Scott Gillingham, you have 2 minutes for closing remarks.
I want to come back to densifying the downtown. I will, as mayor, build upon my record, which I'm proud of, as chair of finance. And as the last couple of years we've come through, we built a economic response and recovery plan to get Winnipeg's economy going. One of the things that we funded in that plan at council, we're pleased to fund in the plan, is the downtown recovery strategy that was put together by the Downtown Biz. Many of you in this room, no doubt, were consulted on it about what you need to make the downtown stronger. Included in that plan is incentives, tax increment financing incentives to densify the downtown to encourage more people to live downtown. But all of us here as candidates are making a myriad of promises to you. I'm the only one that has a real plan to fund those promises. Mr. Murray hasn't tabulated all of his promises, and he says his way to do it is to go to war with the province, to demand more money from them. We have been through several years of an adversarial relationship between the City of Winnipeg and the province of Manitoba. It doesn't work. It's not good for you, it's not good for me, it's not good for your business. Mr. Klein says he's going to pause investment in the City of Winnipeg until he can dive deep and find out where the money's going. What has he been doing the last 4 years? We gave him, the last 4 years, we gave him complete access to all the general ledgers. He could go into any department's detailed financials and find out where the funds were going and where the investment needs to be. He hasn't told you, he keeps talking about the reserves. Well, to get through the pandemic, we used the Rainy Day Fund. The Rainy Day Fund is there just in case of emergency. If a once-in-a-century pandemic is not an emergency, I don't know what emergency is. At the end of the day, our credit rating has increased, and S&P Global said we have strong financial management, robust liquidity, and adequate debt. I'll take that record and those words over Kevin Klein's words.
Thank you very much. Round 5, the topic is Get Winnipeg Moving. This question is posed to all of the candidates. If the downtown is the heart of the city, its streets, transit ways, sidewalks, bike paths, and trails are its arteries. Our city moves forward if people and products can effectively get to where they need to go. Yet our traffic and our main road networks are congested, and personal autos are often in conflict with trucks and bikes. We need a strategic infrastructure and transportation plan that is aligned with economic growth. That defines truck routes, prioritizes improvements, minimizes disruption for people and businesses, and prepares our city for future growth. What is your plan to move Winnipeg more effectively and more efficiently? Robert Falcon-Ouellette, you're first up.
We need good public transit in our city. Many of our workers can't get to where they need to get to efficiently, conveniently. I need to make sure, and we need to make sure, that it's affordable. Did you know that in 1984, 64 million rides occurred with Winnipeg Transit? Today it's 21 million rides. We're going to make it $1 to drive up ridership instead of $3.10. This is going to be good for seniors, workers, students, everyone. And we might actually make our money back because it's going to cost $12 million. But 12 million rides doesn't sound that far off. We need to make sure our transit system is safe. Safety is so important. Who wants to have a terrible experience on the bus? I've spoken to so many people who feel unsafe to be on the buses. We need to make sure that it's convenient, that we use a metro bus system like they do in Quebec City, a similar size city. And we need to make sure our buses are clean. I've heard from so many people who complain about bed bugs and cockroaches and just dirty buses. And we need to make sure that they are excellent for everyone.
Sean Loney, your turn.
The extension of the Chief Peguis Trail project, it would be nice to have. It's ranked 29th on the city's priority list. I want to talk about Kenaston. I have a 5-point plan to address traffic issues on Kenaston. We'll be able to do it sooner and more effectively. But I first wanted to correct the record. I had said that there's twice that the city of Winnipeg submitted proposal to the Government of Canada for funding to expand Kenaston. It was rejected twice. In fact, there's 3 reasons to be concerned. The Canada Lands is owned by, it's the Government of Canada's land developer. They own 1/3 of what's still, as we remember, Capillon. And their urban planning expert said that the plan to extend Kenaston fails to mesh with the proposed development. We have a lot of concerns about Councillor Gillingham's, he's campaigning on this very project. He will not get federal funding. He's doubling down on car culture, and the Government of Canada isn't funding these types of projects anymore.
Thank you very much. Glenn Murray, you have 1 minute.
Thank you very much. We are the largest bus manufacturing center in the world, just about. Paul Soubry has hardly ever seen anyone from City Hall. I was the first one who showed up there and said, how could we build the least expensive rapid transit system and electrify it quickly and save money? And I talked about the idea of a transit lab, which is working in New York. He's very excited about that. And he said, life cycle procurement will partner with you. We would love, because of the Buy America policy, not to have to keep building 70% of our buses in the States. But if we could have this kind of partnership with the city, we could make Winnipeg the global R&D center for design engineering. And in the software sector I'm in with 30 companies, all of us could be supplying New Flyer with guidance and management and parking systems. So we've got to stop thinking about procurement simply as buying things. He estimates that if we could fully get this up and running, he'd be able to go back to 5,000 employees in Winnipeg. We've got to look at procurement and transit and the big move as part of our economic revolution in this century.
Thank you very much. Final response goes to Kevin Klein.
Thank you very much. And again, I'm hearing more about money and I'm hearing more about investment. And my colleague, Councillor Gillingham, talks about taxing and spending more. And let's remember 8 years of Councillor Gillingham on the Finance Committee, and never before in our history has so much tax money been spent to deliver such poor services to our residents. This includes transit. Transit's not safe. I talk to hundreds, thousands of people, and I've moved motions at council several times to make transit safety a priority, denied every time. To have public meetings about the concerns of transit safety, denied every time. We need to make our transit safe. We talk about $1 transit fares, when in reality, if you talk to the transit union and you talk to bus drivers, over 5,000 people a day get on the bus without paying. They're not paying for the service today, and it's not providing an effective service for those that need it. We need to fix our problems and then work on the long-term solution.
Thank you very much. In this round, on the topic of getting Winnipeg moving, Robert Falconet will pose a question to Scott Gillingham, and Sean Loney will provide closing remarks. Over to you, Robert.
As someone who was in the military for 27 years, it's extremely important to follow rules and regulations. And so this means if we want to make a safe transit system, we have to have a zero-tolerance policy for any violence to make sure that workers, when they show up, feel safe in their jobs. Not only that, there are other issues on our buses. And to build the city we all want, we need to have compassion for those around us and together have the strength to address the root causes of the issues impacting our city. Now, we presented a very comprehensive plan to tackle addictions. That includes treatment and detox upon demand when needed by citizens, our fellow brothers and sisters who are in the streets, making sure that we have a supervised consumption site with healthcare professionals who can guide people to the appropriate treatments, ongoing supports when people need them after recovery, and working with Indigenous governments together. And I'd like to pose this question to Mr. Gillingham. What is your approach to addictions?
Scott Gillingham, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Thank you for the question. And Mr. Falconet and I agree that we need to lead with compassion when we see people struggling with addiction. And right now, unfortunately, too often, homelessness, crime, and addiction are feeding off one another. I've said what we will do is establish modular housing, using City of Winnipeg properties, 6 City of Winnipeg properties, which we would identify as surplus properties, pre-zone them, and then use federal government rapid housing initiative funding to build modular housing, get people off the street, and get them the services they need as well. The safe supervised consumption site has been raised many times. I've been consistent on my time on council, and I'm consistent today. Ultimately, addiction services are healthcare services. The province of Manitoba oversees healthcare services. As mayor, I would be a willing partner with the province of Manitoba, to look at establishing supervised consumption site, but only on this condition, only that they lead it, they're the primary funders, and that they provide co-located services so people really get the help that they need. In April of this year, I went out with our transit inspectors. First thing in the morning, our transit inspectors go from bus shelter to bus shelter where people are living. And we came upon one bus shelter on Portage Avenue, not too far from here, where someone had overdosed. It was just after 6 o'clock in the morning. We called 911, put the 911 operator on speakerphone within the transit shelter, and she said, based on what you're describing, you're going to have to do CPR on the man. So our transit inspector started the chest compressions as she counted them out. The fire truck pulled up about 4 minutes later, because I was there and I kind of made note of the time of it. And 2 firefighters got off and gave the man naloxone to keep him alive. The paramedics pulled up, a paramedic supervisor. And by the time it was all said and done, I looked around and thought, this is someone's son we're trying to save. And my second thought was, these are 12 City of Winnipeg employees, and this man doesn't need city services. He needs detox, long-term treatment, and health care. We have to work in partnership with the province of Manitoba.
Robert Falconet, you have 1 minute to rebut.
As someone who spent years helping to educate our youth in the inner city and those from northern Manitoba, it's extremely important to be able to focus on education and as university professor. And I'd like to thank Mr. Gillingham for his response. But when you speak to the people who are actually on the front lines day after day, they say we actually do need a comprehensive plan. But what happens if the partner that you want doesn't want to help you? And that is a tough question to ask. So I think the city needs to have leadership and be willing to go it alone if need be, because it is of such a primary concern to the residents all across this city. Literally, the heart of our city has bled out of the downtown, and it is now residing in our bus shelters in the suburbs. And it is time to do something about it. It is time to have the leadership to face up to what we need to do, to make sure we get the treatment, the supervised healthcare system, the ongoing supports, and working with Indigenous governments to help their citizens, our citizens, together.
Thank you very much. Sean Loney, you have 2 minutes for closing remarks on this topic.
Thank you, Mayor Lee. I wanted to spend my time talking about transit. I've announced an awesome innovation to look at transit in a whole new way. We call it Metro Mobility. With one touch on your phone, a wheelchair accessible van will come to a virtual bus stop near your house, will take you to a regional location or out to the bus where there's arterial routes, made in Winnipeg buses, and they're arriving frequently, and it's a safe transportation system as well. This is what other cities our size are doing. If we do this, we can cancel the purchase of 135 new diesel buses and also have an easier time with the charging network. Now, this is what the Government of Canada is funding. Things like this, not projects like the expansion of Kenniston. And here's an example. Here's two cities that we compete with, Calgary and Edmonton. They're both receiving 5 times more per capita and rapid transit support than we are here in Winnipeg. Why? Because we're going to the Government of Canada talking about roads, which is something you'd hear from somebody that's living in a different century. We need awesome transportation system. We need to encourage people to have these choices that they currently don't have now. Now, the Community Energy Investment Roadmap was published by the City of Winnipeg in June, and it talks about what is our most amazing economic opportunity we have available to us here in the city, creating green jobs. It lays the pathway for 100,000 person-years of employment. Not one announcement in 6 months from Councillor Gillingham about how we lean into that report and how we create those jobs. Gillingham is correct. He does have a fully costed plan. Just wanted to acknowledge that. But my question is for Councillor Klein. I want to talk about crime, and I appreciate this is an important issue for you. The police, we sent them out, the public, 240,000 times last year. 75% of people, once they're arrested, go into the jail system, and they're back in contact with the justice system within 2 years. Councillor Klein's plan is to continue to arrest the same people over and over and over again. This is a very poor way of addressing crime, and it's also tough on taxpayers. Listen to this number. 9 out of every 10 new positions at the City of Winnipeg in the last 20 years went to emergency services. My question is, why focus on arresting the same people over and over again, and why can't we move the money towards things like social enterprises and supportive housing?
Kevin Klein, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Well, thank you very much for your question. And as the Supreme Court has once ruled, you are certainly welcome to your opinion, but you're not welcome to your own facts. And nowhere have I ever said that we're going to just continue to rearrest our way out of this problem. I have never said that. What I have said, and I say with experience, is that when I hear politicians up here saying that police don't have to respond to certain social calls, my mother was murdered by her husband. And I want one of these politicians to tell me how a social worker would respond and have fixed that. I want a politician that stands up here and says they know exactly how to deal with these social crises, and they feel that if they send a social worker, it's better than sending a police officer. Name me 10 social workers in the City of Winnipeg that feel safe enough to approach a house where a situation is tragic, where they don't know what's on the other side of that door. We have had police officers respond to North America domestic violence calls and checks for well-beings, knock on the door, and be killed from a bullet coming through the door. We cannot simply say the success of reducing police calls is having not-for-profit organizations respond. Let's be reasonable. We have 28 police cars that patrol this city. We get 600 calls for service. I don't have to do the math for you. This is not the time to rearrest our way out, no, but we have to support our police. We have to be realistic. We have an ARC program. It's a pilot project with 1 police officer and 1 social worker. Nobody's talking about putting resources there besides me. I'm not hearing it from anybody else. That's where we fix the problem. You send somebody with the training who can deal with the situation at that time and the social worker. Enough saying social workers can fix it.
Thank you very much. Sean Loney, you now have 1 minute for a rebuttal.
Yeah, I actually don't favor sending social workers out to 911 calls, so I'm not sure where you're getting that from. But I also don't think basketballs are going to fix the problem either. I'm much more of a proponent of a thing called a punch clock. And we had an amazing event, a town hall around public safety at the Norwood Hotel just about a month ago. It was packed, and 2 people spoke in particular. One is a guy named Edward who runs a computer shop on Pembina, has been broken into 3 times recently. And one of my former coworkers from Build stepped up and said, you know, Edward, I was robbing the crap out of this neighborhood. I was paying people to rob in this neighborhood. And you know what stopped me? Was a job. And that's the type of approach we need to take in crime in this city, as opposed to just responding after the fact at huge taxpayer expense.
Thank you very much. Glenn Murray, you can now pose a question to the candidate of your choosing.
Yes, Mr. Falcon-Willett, I agree and admire the work that you are doing on addictions and mental health, and the championing that you've done for new relationships between First Nations and the city government and the treaty land entitlements. What would you see as the opportunities going forward, and what would you like all of us to understand from your perspective that the city really needs to most embrace in this area?
You have 1 minute to respond. Or 2 minutes to respond, I apologize.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Murray. I didn't expect to get a question, actually, so I was a little surprised. Well, I think we've been actually ignoring Indigenous peoples for a long time in our city. And we've been looking at our, Indigenous peoples as a weakness in our city instead of a strength. There are so many people in our inner city who have amazing skills making regalia, with dance, with song. Yet do you know we really don't have an Indigenous tourism industry in our city? There are people in France, England, the United Kingdom, in China, and Japan who would love to experience an authentic experience. And we could invite them here to our city and show them that we are the Indigenous capital of Canada, and that Indigenous peoples are not something that we are ashamed of, but we are actually very proud of, because they add so much to our culture. Now, I know Mr. Murray has proposed a number of solutions as well, but we're not going to do this if we don't work together. And I know it sounds, we always say that, a lot of politicians say that. But I think for too often, we actually don't meet with each other. And this is why I'm proposing that the City Council actually sit down with Indigenous governments on a regular basis and actually have these deep conversations, even if they don't want to. It's a shame that Capyong Barracks took so long to get to where it's supposed to be today. It's a shame that any of these urban economic development zones, Indigenous economic zones, are taking so long to get to where they need to. Because if Indigenous peoples are successful in our city, we are all going to be successful. If your neighbor has a good house, you're going to also be profiting from that wealth. And I know many candidates have all proposed great things, but we just need leadership continuing to push forward.
Glenn Murray, you have 1 minute for a rebuttal.
Thank you very much. A lot of this does come down to money. It does mean that we have to fund that. And I agree. And I look at the state of Negadan and the Thunderbird House now and the lack of investment we're making. And while these guys have been in City Hall, I've been volunteering on the Exchange District Biz Board, working on a lot of initiatives and paying taxes to City Hall for many years now. That's why I would like to ask that you support next year's plan. Let's give residential property taxpayers a 1-year break. Let's focus on getting a better deal from the province, which we've done together before. Let's, as businesses, blend the business tax with the commercial tax, but just increase it by 1%. That would cover the tax revenue in lieu of a property tax. And then let's build that same bold plan together along the lines, because I have an 8-page framework document on building the tax base, not the tax burden. So I'm not pulling this out of the air. This is something we've worked on now for several months. And I would like to use that tax-based growth model that Paul Soubry and I have done, which is very serious. And it doesn't require
Thank you very much.
endless property tax increases.
Kevin Klein, it is now your turn to pose a question to the candidate of your choosing.
Well, you know, we always get prepared for these, but I have to kind of have to call an audible here because I'm not sure if I heard correctly. So I'll pose my question to Mr. Murray. So I want to make sure that I've heard this correctly. So you want to have a 1-year freeze on property tax, and you want to get rid of the business tax by bringing it into the business property tax, but you want to increase their property tax. Is that what you're saying? That's my question. And can you explain to me how you're going to tell these businesses, now keeping that in mind, can you explain to me how in these businesses that never before, in the history of the city of Winnipeg, never before, taxpayers pay more money and business taxes to deliver such poor services to our residents? So how are you going to just tax the business, because you've said you're going to increase it by 1%, but you're not going to do any cost controls? So tell me, somewhere in here, what is your plan for the city of Winnipeg in cost controls and with this newfound business tax that I'm just hearing about?
Glenn Murray, you have 2 minutes to answer the question.
Thank you very, very much. So the first thing I launched, my very first announcement, you'll remember, was the governance review. It was to go through the entire city, look at all the gaps. It would be a 6-month process. It would look at the functionality of the departments, how they're funded, where there are gaps, where there are issues. We pay $10 million now into permits that don't go into permits. It goes into general revenue. And look at policy and financial alignment, and then look at revenue options that could be built long-term and successful. Realizing that given the magnitude, given that we're looking at a $7 billion, frankly, infrastructure deficit that's real, how do we tackle those things? How do we approach them? And I know there's a priority on blending the business tax into the commercial realty tax.
That's what you said.
No, that's a request from the chamber. And I agree with that. What I'm asking is that for 1 year, we add 1%, which will provide enough funding to close the gap for 1 year, that we as businesses are prepared to do that. And then we work on meeting the blending of that in future years, so we get down to a standard one commercial property tax, and hopefully by that time, committing to getting the 1% of the PST, as we have done with the GST and with the gas tax, that we would be there with that. So I'm proposing that as a solution, and that's how I think it would work. But why am I taking the time to say, let's take 3 months together to work on this? Because that's how we did it before. That's how we did it before. Dave Angus and I, we came up with a framework. We brought all the business council in, we brought community, we brought poverty groups in, and we looked solution by solution within a framework document, which I provided, and that document and that process will allow us to build the kinds of solutions that we want, because it's all got to be negotiated.
Thank you very much. Kevin Klein, you now have 1 minute for rebuttal.
This is exactly why I decided to run for office. The reality is this: if we own businesses, these are the facts, right? We don't just go and grab more money from somebody. We can't just automatically increase the cost of our service or the fee for our product and hope to make money that way. We have to provide better solutions financially. For the last 8 years, the city's debt has doubled by more than to $1.5 billion, more than doubled. Our property taxes and fees have gone up by more than 20%. Our water rates are up by more than 10%. We're moving into a 30-year high for inflation of 11%, and we're talking about major tax increases. We're talking about new programs, dollar for transit, getting money from the province or the federal government, or who knows where it's going to come from, and nobody is talking about cost controls. We have to do a zero-based budget. A governance review, to me, is talking about what's happening at the City of Winnipeg. I think what you were trying to
Thank you very
allude
much.
to.
Robert Falconer-Ouellette, it is now your turn to pose a question to a candidate of your choice. I had to before we're done for the day. Try it out at least once. I'm never going to be able to do it again. Robert, you have a chance now to pose a
She actually
question.
passed it to me, Kevin.
No. It is all yours.
This is a question to Mr. Klein. The single largest issue surrounding many of the corruption scandals is the lack of transparency and open government. And so we put forward a plan today at a press conference to have the city compile and release an annual list of contracts awarded to campaign donors of the mayor and council to make sure that there is a mandatory registry of all the financial interests of the mayor, councilors, and their immediate family members, including their assets, liabilities, and real estate holdings. And we're going to modernize the conflict of interest rules so that financial relationships and holdings are not limited to those interests within Manitoba. And I also want to talk actually about the culture at City Hall. And I think Mr. Klein will know quite a bit about this. We need to foster a positive work culture where employees are motivated to give their very best every day. And we want to offer and think about the future, offer city management to those identified for succession planning in leadership and management skills development. We need to develop the next generation of leaders in the city administration so that they have the skills.
We need a question, please.
How to make our city a better place. Obviously, Mr. Klein, you have a lot of experience at City Hall. What was your experience?
You have 2 minutes to
You
respond.
can't push mute until the clock starts. All right. I appreciate the question, and yes, I don't have a lot of experience at City Hall. I have 4 years of experience, but it felt like 110. I can tell you that the transparency, the teamwork, and the processes at City Hall are fractured. I can tell you that starting as a city councillor coming from the private sector, you would think that we would all get together as professionals with a common goal, and we would build relationships, and we would talk, but that doesn't happen. There's division. Division's created immediately with the creation of an EPC, and then selections by the mayor. Not done as a team. We didn't sit down and set priorities for the city. We didn't sit down and talk about each other's priorities. More importantly, and I can tell you this as a former chief executive officer, we didn't sit down and evaluate or talk about the strengths and weaknesses of all of us around the table so that we could focus on what was the best for our skills, where we could help the most, and get others into positions where they could help more. We didn't work off each other. We worked behind closed doors. We withheld information from some. Some of your elected officials signed non-disclosure agreements to make a decision at council that cost you money, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, because they signed a non-disclosure agreement. There is no transparency at City Hall. There's no team building at City Hall. It's a culture problem. And that starts with who's at the top. That starts with getting city councilors together and sit down and asking them, what's your ambitions? What are your goals? What are your objectives? And how do we work together to make those goals and objectives happen for the city of Winnipeg? We need that type of leadership. We need to work together and end the backroom meetings, the secret meetings, and all of the EPC.
Thank you very much. Robert Falconet, you have 1 minute for a rebuttal.
Ironically, when I was the Member of Parliament, I thought I had this naive notion that we would have these grandiose evenings where we would discuss with other levels of government, other elected officials, important business leaders, the challenges faced by our city. And in fact, what I discovered is none of us actually coordinate anything together at all. And we often talk through the media. And this is a problem because how can you actually solve the challenges we're facing? I see other jurisdictions in Ottawa, Atlantic Canada, coming together in droves, working together collectively to make sure that they advance their needs. So that needs to change, and culture is extremely important. But I'll leave you with one final thing. I would like to make sure that we know that we need a ranked ballot in our city, and I want to see the province change this. There are so many great candidates on this platform and who are not on the platform, and every one of them should have the opportunity of being voted for. And people shouldn't have the right to vote strategically, but they should be able to vote for who they really believe, so the person who actually wins the mayor's chair has the widest possible mandate.
Thank you very much. Now, each of the candidates will be given 1 minute to provide closing remarks.
There was no setup, by the way.
There was no setup.
It's just us thinking on our feet.
Scott Gillingham, you are first up for closing remarks. You have 1 minute.
Well, thank you again to the Chamber for putting this event on. Thank you to all of you who've come. Thank you especially to the high school students who are here. It's great to see you here. Yes, let's give them a round of applause. and to those that have sponsored them to be here, because really what we're talking about is a future city. We need to make decisions, and I want to make decisions that are 10, 20 years, with implications, because it's the city we're building for you. First thing I'll do as a mayor, it was one of the first announcements I made, is to put a strategic plan together, to get all council in the room to put a plan together for the future of our city. It's a future that I've been talking about. It's a future that will see a better transportation system, a future where the stronger economy, more reliable bus service, a safer city, a city with fewer homeless people and fewer people struggling with addiction. And we can do all that if we do it together. That's why the theme of my campaign has been and remains uniting to build a stronger Winnipeg. On October 26th, vote for me, and together we'll build that city.
Thank you very much. Sean Loney, you have 1 minute for closing remarks.
Great, thanks, Mayor Lee. And I just wanted to acknowledge the other four on the stage. I am very privileged to be standing here with you today. You've all made amazing contributions to the city, and I honor you each as individuals. Our job here was to kind of help you guys differentiate ourselves from each other, and I don't know, I kind of think we've done a good job of that. But the way I see it, every problem is actually an opportunity. Our carbon footprint is a fantastic opportunity to create thousands of new green jobs. Our high police budget's an opportunity for new public safety options that actually prevent crime from happening in the first place. An outdated tax system, an opportunity to become more competitive and innovative. And you deserve a city that focuses on solving problems, and that means we have to do things differently. And you deserve a mayor who sees the potential in each one of us, the potential in our city.
Thank you very much. Glenn Murray, closing remarks, 1 minute.
Thank you very much. You've been remarkable leaders and problem solvers and entrepreneurs and put so much time in. No one here has a plan, sadly, beyond 1 year. What happens in second or third year? What are the tax rates going to be 2 or 3 years out? And why is that? Because they'll all be so high that they would be difficult to sell to the public. So I proposed one solution, I've come honestly here and asked you, that I think gives everyone a break, buys us that year, and allows us to, I won't close libraries and pools, and to do what we need. But I've also got a very specific ask, and it's not just me. The majority of mayors across the country right now, in the same way we did the gas tax, are beating the drum for PST. Because if we don't get that, we will be back. I reduced taxes, I cut the debt from 800 to 400 million, 5 increases in our credit rating. You've never had a mayor with a better financial track record than I've had. And because we had the partnership.
Thank you very much.
So thank you very much, God bless.
Kevin Klein, you have closing remarks, 1 minute.
You know, my vision for the city is no different than your vision, and my vision is sitting right in front of me with Mohammed and Anton. My wife and I have 6 kids. You're welcome to any one of them if you'd like, but we have 6 kids, and I want to have a safe city for my kids, and I listen to all of my colleagues up here, and I thank them all, and I congratulate them all for putting their name forward and speaking to us today. But I'm hearing a lot about promises. I'm hearing a lot about how great we were and all of the facts, the roads and other programs, but I'm not hearing about what's most important. I'm not really hearing about crime solutions. I'm not hearing about cost controls. I'm hearing about tax and spend politics. And we've had enough of tax and spend politics. We need to better reallocate our resources. We have to control spending. We have to improve our processes at City Hall, and we have to get better at what we do for you.
Thank you very much. And our final word today goes to Robert Falcon-Ouellette.
The question I would ask you is, who do you believe actually is going to best represent the values that you want for your city into the future? And who is actually going to be able to accomplish the task that you've heard here today? Our vision is one which is safe, thriving, and livable. And to build the city we all want, we need safety, dealing with addictions and homelessness, and be willing to grind away at it year after year, not when it is easy, but when it is hard. We need affordable transit, arts and culture, rent geared to income, housing, good urban design in our city, a child-friendly city policy, which I didn't have a chance to talk about, an open and transparent City Hall. And yes, we will fill the potholes and we will clear the snow. We need to work with all levels of government. And my friends, it is time for a generational change in leadership to look beyond old politicians and old ideas about the way things have been done for so long, decade after decade. It's time to build the city we all want together.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of our debate. I want to thank all of you for being such attentive listeners. And to all 5 of our candidates today, you didn't give me too hard of a time. Thank you. And thank you for your participation. This really is a valuable asset. Thanks again to the Chamber for putting this on so we could learn a little bit more about the platforms. Thank you all again very much.